Right Away with Craig Murray. For more information, visit cmurray.com. A Cast of Thousands. A number of years ago, I was asked to review the manuscript of someone who wanted to write a book. Especially with beginner writers, there's a tendency to be as kind and charitable as you can be. Everyone needs to start somewhere, everyone needs to learn, everybody needs to break the bad habits they've picked up along the way. One big bad habit of a lot of writers, both beginning or not, is the mistake of describing everything or treating everyone as if they were a major character. In this instance, the author described the heroine's apartment in meticulous detail. He described her easy chair, complete with its entire convoluted history. He went into painstaking detail, emphasis on pain, about her truly gigantic collection of books. Not only did he talk about the numbers, but then he proceeded to list them by title. Dozens of them. Dozens and dozens. It was a painful review, and I did what anyone else would do. After realizing it was just a list of title after title, I stopped reading and scanned ahead several pages. I'm not kidding. Several pages of book titles. This was completely unnecessary, massively uninteresting, and just dragged the story to a crawl. This chapter alone was, if I recall, about 8,000 words. Almost all of it excessive detailing. Then to add insult to injury, he did the unforgivable. Her apartment caught fire and everything that had just been described was burned to ash. What this does is make everything we'd learned, all the time the reader had invested, a complete waste of time. And that wasn't the first time in the novel he'd done that. Previously, there was a scene where the heroine in her car spaceship starts to look at all the dials, displays, controls across the dashboard. I'd like you to imagine the cockpit of a jumbo jet. Now imagine someone sitting and telling you what each and every button and blinking thing does. Again, it was an example of truly excessive and completely unrequired detailing. The vehicle isn't real. We have no need to know what they all do. Just another waste of time. When I mentioned it to him, he became really pretty livid. He had decided that each and every detail he put in, excessively, was absolutely needed to be known. When I asked him if we ever see the cockpit again, or if any of the controls or things the reader needs to know, he said no. When I asked about the library, now burned to a crisp, the same question, he also said no. He was, however, adamant you needed to know it. Don't waste your readers' time. They won't appreciate it. It doesn't move the story along. We see a similar thing in some writing where there's a cast of thousands, and every single one of them is named and detailed. Your hero on their way to work stops at the newsstand and grabs a paper. Now let's leap in and detail the newsagent's life, his history, and all the troubles he's having. You'll never see him again. He won't reappear. None of his backstory will affect the novel in any way, so why have him? Okay, this is the writer's balancing act. You can decide how much information is absolutely necessary. Now, we don't want our main character to be in a world of cardboard cutout backdrop people. We also don't need excessive detail, so there has to be a happy medium. The odd person you give a little more detail to, and I do mean the odd person, not every person, will add color and depth to the story. Excessive detailing just slows everything down. Jack stopped at the newsagent's and lifted the morning paper. Dropping his money on the counter, he nodded to the newsagent and continued on his way. Okay, the minimalist approach. Jack walked up to the newsagent's. "How you doing, Jackie?" he called out. Jack smiled. This is the only guy who called him Jackie, and he didn't mind. "Not too bad, Pete. Busy day." "Ah, well, guys like you are always busy, ain't you?" Jack gave a melodramatic sigh and said, "You know it, brother." Handing him the money for the newspaper, he folded it under his arm and said, "You take care of yourself." "I got to. No one else will," he replied with a laugh. So a little more detail. We can imagine that the newsagent, a little rough around the edges, personable, maybe even a little gruff. We've added some flavor without overpowering the stew. The newspaperman isn't just background nothing. He may play no role in the story, or he might be a great source for on-the-street news, but to the reader, he's at least real. These little dashes of flavor add to your writing, to your story's world, without excessively complicating it. One of the biggest problems your reader may face is being overwhelmed with names. I'm sure someone's done a detailed, intelligent study on how many names can be introduced before it becomes overwhelming, If I was to go with a gut feeling, I would say 5. I'm not going to say this is a hard and fast rule. I'm just going to say from reading other people's manuscripts, short stories or novels, unless each character is incredibly specific and different, you find yourself going, who? The other thing, of course, is name complexity. Okay, we don't always name everybody Bob or Fred or Mary. At the same time, if you give a person a 14-syllable name, then there's a very real possibility it gets shortened to a single letter. All of your careful planning and attempts at cultural inclusion are wasted. You didn't create a name that's memorable. You created a tongue twister that readers will ignore. We should avoid doing that. Javro Salek Karabowalski becomes JRK. The only thing you've done is type more than you need to. Everybody does this. You probably do it too, so don't do it. You're reading a story, you get to a complicated name, you shorten it. It happens. Also, for the sake of sanity, don't make names similar so they blend into each other and your reader has to go back and go, who? Karen, Kathy, Catherine, and Kate all walked into the restaurant and immediately asked for the manager. Kathy, or maybe it was Karen, said, or was it Catherine? It doesn't matter. If a person or thing is never going to appear again in your story, or if they do appear only as background, don't overly detail them. Keep your story moving forward. Keep the energy and excitement up and don't drag it down by confusing the reader or boring them. This is also true for events in your story. Try not to include pointless go-nowhere events or actions. Our heroine, Susan, has to get to the airport so she can get a flight to Dusseldorf to stop the bad guys from assassinating the president. However, on her way she gets a flat tire. She has a lengthy discussion about cars, maintenance, and reliability with the tow truck driver who stops and helps her. She said she has plenty of time because she left early. She stops at a coffee shop. There she talks excessively with the server about the history of donuts. She spills coffee on herself. Now we have to talk about the cost of dry cleaning and why the lid isn't a very good design. Getting to the airport, we learn everything about the parking attendant and the different problems he's faced in his job. Okay, don't laugh. I have actually seen variations of this. Hundreds of variations of this. None of these people or incidents will affect the story in any way. They're background fluff that are put in because the author is just trying to fill space. Sometimes because they decided these things are fascinating, when really they're not. All they really end up doing is slowing down the story, and that's not something we want to do. The one great and constant question you always got to be asking yourself is this: is it moving the story forward? Is it important? And that, of course, is as far as the reader is concerned. And if you're not thinking about your reader, you're thinking about yourself, and that's ego writing, and that is not good. And it's also the subject for another talk.